the subject is formidable. Nobody wants to speak about failure because everybody is pretty much okay talking about success and how to quickly achieve it. But
Mm.
what made you pick up a topic which is best avoided by a lot of people, to pick it up and then analyze how failure contributes to developing character, life, and even success?
Yeah, so first, thanks for having me on this podcast. Yeah, I got around to failure, having experienced a lot of failure myself in my teens and 20s. But really, it was, I'm a learning scientist, so I look at how does the mind work? How do people learn? And I became very interested in what does the process of initial learning looks like. So when you first come to understand something new, what is that process? What goes on inside your body, inside your brains, inside your mind, and so on, when you first come to understand something new? And it is in this space where the dominant paradigm was, and actually still is that if you don't know something, let me just tell you what it is very clearly, very in an engaging manner. And that's the paradigm that I started to question because of research that was coming out that this paradigm was suboptimal. Was not. It led to shallow understanding. It led to an illusion of learning, actually, and not real deep learning. And and once I started to question it, I said, okay, if this method does not work, then maybe we should turn it entirely on its head and say, well, start with failure first. If you're about to learn something new, let me intentionally design failure-based activities for you where you feel you can do something, but you will not get to the correct solutions, and then bootstrap that activation, that knowledge, to then learn the thing that you're trying to learn. And that's how, and then yeah, that was part of my doctoral thesis and the research ever since.
What, in a nutshell, do you really mean by productive failure?
The productive failure is the idea that if we say learning from failure is powerful, or failure can be a good teacher when it happens, then why do we wait for failure to happen? Why don't we intentionally design for it? Right. And so the idea is when you're learning something new, instead of going straight into learning about that thing, it's perhaps better to design activities where you first try your own ideas and solutions and strategies and approaches in a safe explorative space, which is designed for you to not get to the correct answer or correct solution. And then use this failure as a sort of bootstrap for learning from an expert or instruction later on. So the expert knowledge is key, but first, failing by exploration in a safe space is also very critical. And the combination of the two, first failure-based exploration, followed by instruction or expert knowledge, the combination of the two is what makes failure productive.
Fantastic. I have spoken to design thinkers, and I have actually studied design thinking myself, where there is a concept which says fail early, fail cheap. If you
Okay.
fail early, you fail cheap, and you correct your errors before moving on to becoming correct, or sort of, becoming productive or successful, however you
Right.
want to term it.
Yeah.
Is that aligned to your thought?
Yeah. So design is like design across different. So my bachelor's was in engineering, so design is a core practice of engineers or design wherever there is design. And as long as you are, really exploring creative design, failure is bound to happen. That's just a byproduct, even if it's not intentionally designed for. In design, you don't fail for the sake of failing. It's the process itself is creative, that failure naturally emerges. It's a byproduct of design. In productive failure, we are designing that failure by intentionally into the problem-solving process. I think that's the slight difference, but overall, the philosophy is similar.
Dr. Kapoor, initially you said that, in your 20s, in your early career, you have witnessed a lot of failures which sort of triggered this thought for a deeper exploration. If you could take us through some of those anecdotes, will be very interesting. for our viewers?
Yeah, sure. So, growing up as a teenager, I wanted to play football. So I wanted to play competitively. I did play competitively. The idea was not to become a professor, but to become a professional football player, right? And there, even the physical training sort of philosophy was, you do your physical training to failure. So, you do your pull-ups, push-ups all the way to failure until you really can't. And then you push a little bit more in a safe way so that you don't injure yourself. And it's really that push beyond that limit is what is really good for your mental and physical development. So it was already built into kind of the way we played and trained for football. And then my knee gave way, there was an injury, a bad tackle, so the football was completely out. Right? And so that was my first big kind of failure, which led me to pursue a plan B in engineering. So I did my bachelor's in engineering, but by the time I was done with engineering, I knew I didn't want to be an engineer. I wanted something else. And by some meandering, I went into the industry, which did not work out. And then I started to teach math to poor income kids, or kids from poor income, low income families. And that's when it really started to think about cognition. How does the mind work? How do people process information? And that then led me to a scholarship to do my PhD, and that led me to a thesis on productive failure. So yeah, it's from the good old football training days to becoming an academic and a professor of failure. It's been quite a journey.
You would want to also speak about a couple of examples that you have picked up in your book about cases where failures have really paved the way for bigger achievements.
there are lots of there are lots of people. I mean, you hear these inspirational stories about people who failed a lot. So, there are these in sports, there are plenty. For example, Michael Jordan, he's famous for this quote that he's failed, he succeeds because he's failed, and so many shots he's missed in his career.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg didn't, missed out on some applications to film schools, got rejected so many times. Same for Jack Ma and his job applications or things like that. So there are plenty of inspirational examples where people who've experienced a lot of failure naturally in their lives, but have come out for the stronger. And that is all. That is all really fine and good. The question is, again, the argument in the book is, well, we can't wait for failure to happen, right? Because by the time that happens, that the stakes are already very high, and they're the few who actually make good out of it, right? For every, Michael Jordan, there are hundreds that did not had similar kinds of failure that did not make it. For every Jack Ma and other entrepreneurs, there are many who did not make it. So and so the question is, if failure is powerful, how do we actually use it early and in a way that is safe, where the stakes are low, so that you can learn and grow in a robust way, so that when failure actually matters, the stakes are that the likelihood of success is great. And that's what we actually showed in our experiments.
Failure has a lot of psychological ramifications, while
Mm,
scientifically you might see that is as a pivot, um, building or telling people how to do better or change their technique. But
mm,
failure takes a toll. Some people spring
mm,
back, some people bounce back, some people their internal whatever self-perception or ego or whatever we want to call it
mm,
takes a big hit and they can never spring back. They
mm,
vanish from whatever they wanted to do in the first place.
mm.
So it's slightly more complex than just uh, a very clinical subject. So how do you
Mm,
deal with the emotional side of failure? Because failures, be it in relationships, be it work, money, business,
mm.
everything, it's a very wide subject. So there is a huge emotional context to the subject as well. What do you have to say about
Exactly.
that?
And we studied emotions as well in failure. We've
Mm,
studied how the emotional dynamics of people going through, when you're trying to solve a problem, you're generating ideas, you're not able to get to the correct solutions or strategies.
mm,
It can be very
mm,
frustrating. People feel a lot of shame, guilt, anxiety, and so on and so forth as they're going
mm,
through. And we've actually we've captured this pipeline of data and, tried to understand this emotional roller coaster. And here's the thing, most people think that, positive emotions are related with positive learning outcomes. That is not necessarily true. And
mm.
people also
Can be
think
delusional
negative,
also.
exactly. And people also think that negative emotions are monotonically bad for learning.
Mm,
Actually, that is not
mm,
true. We've seen correlations between certain level, not a whole lot, right? Certain levels of frustration, certain levels of anxiety, certain levels of feeling, shame or guilt actually have positive effects on your learning, provided it's done in a safe space. And so first, I think we have to change this mindset that making learning easy eases learning. Learning is an emotional process, and as
mm.
long as those emotions are within like a zone that people can deal with, then they can be positive for learning. Um, the, and so, how do people learn to deal with emotions if they're never put in the space where they feel these emotions? Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's the idea of productive failure, that yes, struggling is bad. Yes, feeling anxiety is bad. But how would you learn how to deal with these emotions if you never experience them? And so part of the design for productive failure is for people to experience these emotions in a safe way and normalize that. To say this is what will happen and this is what you should expect. This is the norm when you're in this zone where you're trying something that you do not have the knowledge for. And that starts to, and that's where I like to say you have to learn how to fail, including the emotional dynamics, so that you can use failure to learn. So it's not a one-time thing. It's a developmental trajectory that the more you experience learning from productive failure, the more you learn how to deal with these emotions, and the more you learn how to deal with emotions, the deeper you can go into that exploration and bootstrap failure for learning. And this is all a very critical component. And especially in the education system, we don't quite equip our children with these kinds of experiences. We simply wait for failure to happen, like in major tests and exams, and then we say, "Oh, that's terrible." Of course, that's really terrible. But we
Mm.
had this opportunity to teach them in ways, to educate them in ways that they could have developed better capacity, more capability, to learn how to fail early in a safe way and learn how to deal with it and also learn deeply.
Do you
And that's
think
the idea.
preparation is key to, we see in the systems which have been sort of installed meritocracy,
Mhm.
preparation is key to success. But then sometimes even heavy amounts of preparation and suppositions also fail because there is a game of chance.
Yeah.
Do you think that you can strategize enough to ensure success? Or,
No, I think no, I think there is separate research. This is not my area, but
mm,
preparation. They say luck favors the prepared.
correct.
But luck is its own thing. So there's a lot of luck involved, and I think that could on the one hand be depressing, but it could also be a bit liberating. It's like all you
Mm,
can do is to trust your process. All you can do is
mm,
to trust your preparation, and
mm,
productive failure is a way of preparation, right?
mm.
It is a way of preparation that leads to deep learning, so that when the stakes are high, the likelihood of failure is reduced. But you can never completely negate it because that is life.
So, from what I gather from you, there has to be a culture to which allows people to experiment and fail before they sort of begin to celebrate. Because so all over the world, the systems are sort of designed for success. That you have to prove yourself by achieving a certain number, cracking a certain exam, bagging a certain salary, bagging a certain job, cracking a huge funding, everything that, but nobody really celebrates the long, the failures that in that the journey of failure is very isolated. It's a very, it's a very lonely journey. And
Mm-hmm.
I think for the first time, somebody is throwing light on that aspect, that, so much goes before you test that little bit of glory. And there has to be a science in that. And I think it brings um, a lot in perspective about the subject of failure and how everybody needs to wake up to that as well, because that's a big part of anybody's journey trying to achieve anything. Would you like to speak about uh, your personal struggle, any
Mm-hmm.
particular personal struggle that has really been uh, uh, defining for you in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, several. So just as a when I proposed this theory back 20 years ago as a doctoral student, this was going against the dominant theory of the time, the dominant
Mm.
paradigm, as I said. And I was simply not able to publish my work, because the experiment is there. It's very well laid out. It's robust, but the findings are so contrarian that people say, no, there must be something wrong with what you've done. Either it's the methods, it's the design, it's the instruments, not. And that was really hard because you've done the work, you've done it well, and the data are the way are, the way they are. They contradict the dominant theory. So it was really and that's what somehow breakthroughs are, have that flavor. But that means the
Mm.
person who actually makes the breakthrough actually suffers because the hurdle to prove to shift the paradigm is not something that happens with one study. It requires a lot more experiments, a lot more replication, other people finding out and reproducing your work. So these initial, I would say 2 years, 3 years, where I could not get my paper even published, or my work published, because the hurdle was so high, precisely given the nature of my work. But eventually I did. And I tell people, like, I could have given up at that in those 2 years and none of this would have gone through. And goes back to your early point. How far do you persist, and what's how well your circumstances around you allow you to persist, because everybody has a limit. So sometimes I shudder to think when I go back, yeah, there were times there where I just felt maybe I'm wrong, right? Everybody around me is saying this can't be true, this can't be true. Of course, 20 years on, it seems like, oh, it's intuitive, it's so intuitive, yes, it must be true. But back then, it was not. At least not to the scientific community, it was not. And so, yeah, that was a hard time. And it didn't end there. I mean, that was just the start. I just got when my first paper came out in 2008. That was just the start, and then the load of criticism that comes through. Everybody, because you're just going against the grain, and then you battle that slowly, and over time you try to turn the tide over. And that's precisely what's happening. Not to say there are still people who don't believe in it. Yes, in spite of
Mm.
all the empirical evidence that we've gathered over the years and other people who've showed similar effects now, there is still a lot of resistance. But that's how science is. Science does not
Yeah.
change, theory so easily. It takes a lot of evidence to change it.
Yeah. So a lot of empathy and, softer quotients of empathy and sensitivity, all these are, and awareness, everything comes together to sort of build that sort of a mindset. It's a mindset
Mhm.
issue, to be able to, go through the journey. So, what will be your next book? Will it be uh, beyond failure? I mean, what is on your mind?
Yeah, no, I think it will be. Look, this book came out of my first TED Talk, which was on
Right.
productive failure, and I focused that TED Talk only on learning, right?
Yeah.
And last year I gave my second TED Talk, and that was looking at productive failure as a mechanism, not just in learning context, but in a host of systems, all the way from human biology to vaccination, to the nature of language, to psychotherapy, to engineering design, to entrepreneurship, to nature of science itself, to evolution. So I basically, string a thread through all these seemingly very different phenomena, and made the argument that actually productive failure is at the core of all of these phenomena. And maybe I'm thinking, and so that really takes the argument of productive failure beyond just learning and growth settings, to really as a more universal phenomena that we see in adaptive systems. And maybe that would be my next. Let's see.
All the best to you, and thank you for your time.
No, thank you so much. It was a pleasure chatting with you.